It started like any other panel. The lights were bright, the audience expectant, the host smooth and practiced. Jasmine Crockett sat poised, confident, her words flowing like polished steel, sharp, refined, rehearsed. And then came the line. "A joke," she said, a quick jab wrapped in laughter, tossed casually across the table. The crowd chuckled, uncertain. The host smiled too quickly. Kash Patel didn't move. He blinked once. That was all. On screen, it was just a moment. A comment, a laugh, a silence. But something had cracked. Patel didn't respond. Not then. His hands rested neatly on the table. His eyes didn't find hers. He let the silence do what so many voices couldn't. But what if he hadn't? What if instead of swallowing the insult, instead of nodding and letting the air reset, Patel had leaned forward, met her gaze, and said, "Enough"? What if Kash Patel hadn't held back? Would the room have exploded? Would Crockett have unraveled? Would the truth, unfiltered, unshielded, have landed like thunder instead of smoke? This is not what happened, but it could have. This is the story of the version no one saw, the fire that didn't ignite, because sometimes restraint is a choice, and sometimes you wonder what it would have meant if someone didn't choose it. The auditorium was still, not silent, still, like breath held before a verdict. Over 200 people sat wrapped in the performance of politics, nods at the right moments, polite laughter cued on instinct, camera lenses capturing every twitch of confidence and every crack in poise. Jasmine Crockett was in command. Her voice moved with the ease of someone certain no one could stop her. Each line, measured, each laugh, calculated, each insult, draped in charisma and wrapped in plausible deniability. Kash Patel sat beside her, unreadable, dressed sharp, shoulders square. His presence was controlled restraint, and then it happened. The moment she slipped the joke in, a swipe, a smile, a line she thought would vanish into applause. Some people are just chosen because they fit the story. She didn't say his name. She didn't need to. The audience gave a strained laugh. One of those laughs that doesn't rise naturally, but clings to the air, like it's afraid of overstaying. Michael Hayes glanced down at his notes. Maybe he missed it. Maybe he didn't want to catch it. Patel stayed still, but in the third row, a man shifted. No applause came next. No follow-up zinger. The room had moved on, but the moment hadn't. Crockett continued, unaware she was speaking through something broken now. The man in the third row didn't blink. His hands were calm, resting on his knees. But the air around him had changed, like a wire pulled too tight, waiting to snap. And Patel? Still silent, still composed, still letting it pass. But what if he didn't? What if this was the moment he leaned forward, cleared his throat, and said exactly what the room was pretending it didn't need to hear? Imagine this. Patel speaks, not loudly, not dramatically, but with purpose. He stops the show, not by shouting, but by finally refusing to play along. That's the moment we're about to step into now. The moment that never happened, but almost did. The moment that would have rewritten every headline, every perception, every script. Let's rewind. Let's go back to when Crockett smirked and said the line. Some people are just chosen because they fit the story. And imagine that he didn't let it slide. Rewind the moment. The words still hang in the air, still warm from the smile that delivered them. Some people are just chosen because they fit the story. Now freeze. Before the camera cuts. Before the audience reacts. Before the tension is brushed away like dust from a suit jacket. In this version, he doesn't stay silent. In this version, Kash Patel moves. It's not dramatic. He doesn't slam the table. He doesn't raise his voice. He just leans forward, slightly, deliberately, and says, calmly, No. The word slices through the air like a clean break. Crockett turns, her expression still amused. But it falters, just a hair. She wasn't expecting this. Patel doesn't blink. You think I was chosen because I fit the story? That's cute. Let me tell you something about the story you think you know. The room shifts. The crowd, still silent, becomes alert. He isn't lashing out. He's peeling back something. Patel continues. I wasn't placed here like a puzzle piece. I wasn't picked like a costume to match a narrative. His voice is steady, sharp without shouting. I built my seat at this table while people like you questioned whether I deserved to sit down. Crockett tries to speak. Her instinct is to pivot, to joke, to control, but he's already ahead of her. You talk about values, he says. Do your values include assuming someone like me couldn't possibly belong unless someone handed me the script? The audience doesn't laugh. No one claps. But no one looks away. Patel isn't debating. He's dismantling, and he isn't doing it for applause. You know what it feels like, he says, to walk into a room where your presence is seen as decoration, where people smile while quietly measuring how much you fit their expectations. He doesn't glance at the audience. He speaks like he's lived it 1,000 times already, and maybe he has. My father, he says now, his voice lower, was asked every week if he was in the right country, at job interviews, at airports, at the DMV. Every time someone said, "Where are you really from?" They weren't curious. They were reminding him. Now Crockett is silent. She shifts slightly in her seat. I've heard these jokes before, Patel says, dressed up as casual, played off as clever, but they always punch down, and they always leave someone bleeding quietly in the back row. In the third row, the man with silver hair watches without blinking. And maybe you didn't mean it that way, Patel adds. Maybe you thought it was just a throwaway line. A pause. But what does it say about the throwaway if it always lands on someone else's dignity? Crockett breathes in. Her posture is still straight, but the edge has softened. She wasn't ready for this. And neither was the room. Michael Hayes doesn't interrupt. The crew doesn't move. The cameras stay fixed. No sound cue, no fade to commercial. Just a man who decided for once not to let it slide. In this version of the story, Kash Patel doesn't wait. He doesn't hold back. He speaks, not to destroy her, not to win, but to be heard without apology. This is the version that didn't happen. But if it had, it would have finished the debate in seconds and started a different kind of conversation entirely. The silence after Patel speaks isn't stunned. It's surgical. It carves through the room with precision, stripping away the show, the set, the script. Crockett tries to smile, that practiced, unbothered grin, but it lands softer now. Not confident, defensive. She leans forward slightly. A familiar rhythm. Brush it off, regain control, flip the script. It was just a joke, she says, tone light, like it's all beneath real consequence. But this time, Patel doesn't blink. He answers evenly. That's what they always say. And then he locks eyes with her. Let me tell you something about being chosen. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. I wasn't chosen to fit a story. I was chosen because I didn't. His voice flows, not sharp, not emotional, just relentless. I've been the wrong face in the room since I was 12. Too brown to be assumed American. Too quiet to be taken seriously. Too composed to be called passionate. Too direct to be safe. No one breathes. When I applied for jobs in law, I was told I was articulate, as if it was a surprise. When I entered politics, I was told I was an interesting pick, as if I was a mascot for a strategy, not a man with something to say. He glances at the audience now, not for approval, but as if to make sure they're hearing what they've avoided. I didn't ask for your joke. I didn't ask to be the punchline. But since you offered, let me show you what happens when someone who's just here for diversity optics answers back. Crockett tries to step in. She opens her mouth, but it's too late. The wave is already rolling. You think being on this stage means I was handed something, that my place at this table is decoration. What you didn't ask is how many doors I had to hold open myself, only to find someone already laughing inside. The line stings, not because it's loud, but because it's true. Because it wasn't aimed at her. It was aimed at everyone who ever laughed along. There's a difference between being chosen to check a box, Patel says, and being chosen because the box didn't exist until someone forced it open. Still calm, still composed. In rooms like this, people like me are expected to absorb, to be grateful, to be quiet. A beat. I've done that for years. He pauses, then looks to Crockett. Not today. The audience doesn't clap. It doesn't cheer. It listens. Because something more powerful than applause is happening. They're feeling it, in their gut. Crockett adjusts in her chair. She tries to find her footing, tries to spin it. I think we've all had to fight to be here, she says, searching for neutral ground. A peace offering wrapped in generalization. But Patel doesn't let it drift. He nods slowly. Yes, but I never made someone else smaller to prove I belonged. The line doesn't stab. It unfolds. You joke about people being chosen to fit an agenda, he says. But you forget. When people hear that enough, they start to believe they never earned anything. The third row is still. His father hasn't moved. Not yet. And the worst part, Patel says, quieter now. Some start to believe that maybe they are just the token. Maybe they are just the story someone else wrote for them. He looks out into the audience again. Not accusing, not pleading, just showing them what they never thought to see. There's no power in silence unless you know what to do with it. But there's danger in jokes told too often to people taught not to answer. Crockett exhales. Her eyes lower for a split second. She doesn't smile this time. Because the crowd isn't laughing. They're listening. They're watching a man they've never truly heard until now. And for the first time, she's not facing a panelist. She's facing someone who brought an entire generation's silence with him and left the door open wide enough for it to finally speak. It's not a collapse. It's not dramatic. It's quieter than that. Jasmine Crockett sits back. Not far, just a breath's width of distance, but enough. Enough to show that the rhythm she once commanded has slipped from her hands. She isn't unraveling. She's reassessing. Because in the space between Patel's words and the audience's silence, something sharp has landed where applause used to live. She tries to respond. She doesn't want to seem shaken. I think we all say things we don't mean the way they sound. Her voice is softer now. Not broken. Uncertain. A flicker of humility passes through. But not quite surrender. She's still in the game. But the crowd knows it's changed. Patel doesn't press. He doesn't need to. He lets her speak. He lets her try. But he's already said what needed to be said. Now Crockett is talking into a space that's no longer fully with her. And that's what she feels. Not shame, not outrage. Absence. The absence of agreement. The absence of momentum. And that absence? It's louder than critique. She tries again. A softer angle this time. You're right that jokes can land wrong, but I never meant... Patel looks at her, not unkindly, but firmly. You don't need to finish that sentence, he says. She stops, because in his voice, there's no triumph, no gloating, just clarity. And that's what undoes her more than any confrontation ever could. This wasn't a debate anymore. It wasn't a competition. It was a reckoning, not just with Patel, but with the words she chose and the people they dismissed. She glances at the crowd. She doesn't see laughter. She doesn't see approval. She sees eyes, wide open now, looking at her not as the sharpest voice on the stage, but as the person who didn't see who else was in the room. And that changes everything. And then he moves. The man in the third row. He stands. Not fast, not dramatically. He rises the way stone shifts in silence, slow, certain, unshakable. Kash Patel doesn't turn to look. He already knows. The crowd's attention slides from the stage to the space 3 rows back, not because they were told to look, but because they felt it. Crockett sees him now, and her breath catches. He's not angry. He's not trembling. His hands stay loose at his sides, his chin steady, his eyes fixed, not on Patel this time, but on her. And when he speaks, it's just 6 words. Speak if you must, son. Then, after a pause that feels like the final page of a worn book, but speak truthfully, and finish it. The words land like iron on silk, software, but irreversible. Crockett looks down for a second, her first retreat of the night, not out of fear, but recognition. Recognition that something deeper is unfolding, something not about winning a moment, but about carrying a weight that never asked to be applauded. The man doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't look for the camera. But somehow the camera finds him anyway. He becomes the center, not by claiming it, but by embodying it. A father who has heard too many jokes, felt too many silences, endured too many polite dismissals wrapped in civic language. He doesn't say anything else. He doesn't need to. Patel turns toward him now, not in surprise, but with reverence, as if even this version of the story, where he didn't hold back, still depended on one truth. That silence, when broken, should still know when to bow to wisdom. Crockett watches, frozen, not out of resistance, but out of understanding. She has debated senators, sparred with anchors, walked through firestorms of opinion. But this is different. This isn't backlash, it isn't attack, it's presence. And presence, when rooted in truth, doesn't need permission to change the room. Imagine how it would have spread, not in fragments, not as sound bites, but as a storm. The clip, Kash Patel speaking with precision, calling the joke what it was, exposing the quiet cruelty dressed as commentary. The moment his father rose, the weight of his words, the look on Crockett's face, not wounded but aware. On social media, it wouldn't have needed hashtags, just a caption. He didn't let it slide. Thousands would share it, some in awe, others in debate. Some would say, "Finally, someone said what needed to be said." Others would argue, "He went too far. She didn't mean it like that." But no one would deny. The room changed, because Patel didn't wait. Late-night shows would replay it, framing it as a rare moment when a politician spoke without filter, without poll-tested caution. Op-eds would clash over it. Was it righteous anger? Was it controlled confrontation? Was it justified? Students would quote it. Teachers would dissect it. And in private living rooms, people who had laughed at similar jokes might shift uncomfortably. In this version, Crockett wouldn't have vanished. She'd be everywhere, explaining, clarifying, apologizing, or not. But none of it would land the same, because the power of the moment wouldn't lie in what she said. It would lie in what Patel answered. And more than that, it would lie in what his father allowed to stand beside him. A man who had lived through 1,000 cuts of words, just like hers. And finally, heard one get stopped mid-air. If this had been the moment that went viral, not the silence, not the restraint, but the retort, would it have taught more? Or just echoed louder? Would it have ended Crockett's momentum? Or simply shifted the spotlight? One thing's certain, people would have remembered it not as a conversation, but as a reckoning. Now step back, 2 versions of the same moment, one rooted in silence, the other carved in response. In one, Patel waits, lets the weight of his father's presence do what no words could. In the other, he speaks, and his words slice through the room like a thread snapping under tension. Both versions hold truth, but which one holds power? It's tempting to believe the louder one wins. The takedown, the verbal precision, the victory that fits neatly in a clip, wrapped for virality. But the quieter version, the one that actually happened, did something different. It didn't shift the room with argument. It shifted it with stillness, with discomfort, with reflection. There was no attack, no need to prove anything. Just a man who refused to give his energy to ignorance, and a father who stood without asking anyone to clap. That version didn't break Crockett. It bent her toward something harder to name. Accountability without instruction, awareness without punishment. But the alternate version? That had force, that had fire. And maybe the world needs both. The voice that speaks when the silence grows too heavy, and the silence that reminds us not every insult deserves an answer. Maybe strength isn't in the response. Maybe it's in knowing when you've already said enough, or when saying something could finally expose the gap between intent and impact. So which version was stronger? That's not the right question. The real question is, which version would have made you stop? The one where a man kept calm and let the world witness the weight of dignity, or the one where he stood, spoke, and made sure no one ever mistook quiet for weakness again? Maybe the answer isn't either or. Maybe the lesson is, in every room where words are used like weapons, someone is choosing restraint, and someone else is wondering what would happen if they didn't. So maybe this version didn't happen. Maybe Patel never raised his voice. Maybe he chose not to correct, not to cut, not to confront. But the possibility, the idea of what could have been said, that's what lingers, because silence is a choice. But so is the decision to speak, to respond not for applause but for truth. And every time someone says, "It was just a joke," every time a laugh is used to cover a cut, there's a chance someone like Patel is sitting across the table, choosing whether to stay silent or not. In this imagined version, he didn't hold back. He stood. He answered. He made it unmistakably clear his place wasn't granted. It was earned. And in that truth, Crockett's command slipped, not because she lost the argument, but because the room finally saw what it means when someone doesn't let it slide. So what would have happened if Patel had spoken like this? Maybe Crockett would have been finished, but maybe we all would have just started seeing things a little more clearly.